Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic, and welcome back to the Good Morning Asgard podcast, episode 567 of the Welcome to Asgard podcast. We are doing this morning stream on a Wednesday during the summer, as I still have about another week or so off before our school meetings start, and the school year gets ripping and roaring as soon as that first week of August comes around. But we have, let's just say, a lot of stuff to talk about because we have a new MCU film coming out. That's right, Fantastic Four First Steps is coming out tomorrow night, in fact. Thursday evening is when the premieres will be going across the country. And we, of course, also have those Friday numbers that'll be coming in across the world, as this is getting a simultaneous global release, similar to how James Gunn's Superman film also was released in every market, domestically and internationally, at the same exact time. Fantastic Four is set to have a very similar release, and so we'll get a pretty good idea early on as far as what the film is likely going to do. And what's interesting about everything is that right now, at least according to the current tracking from the so-called box office experts, is that Fantastic Four First Steps is likely to have a smaller global opening than that of Superman. So James Gunn's Superman looks like it's going to have that opening weekend advantage up against Fantastic Four. Now, of course, this is early tracking. Right now, the early reviews coming out is very, very positive. The guys over at Film Threat were very, very positive about this movie. Chris Gore said he liked the film a heck of a lot more than he did Superman. And based on the reactions that I'm seeing from the likes of Jeremy Jahns and other people that I genuinely, in general trust, as far as the reviews are concerned, it definitely seems like this movie might actually be a return to form. Now, again, I'll believe it when I actually see it, and I obviously will be going to check it out for myself, just like I did for Superman. All my thoughts and opinions will be my own, and it'll be interesting to see what the conversation is about the film. What is interesting to me, though, in this battle between these two movies, right, between Superman, or rather, James Gunn's Superman and that of Fantastic Four, is that even though the current tracking has Fantastic Four with a lower opening weekend globally than the opening weekend that was for Superman, what's interesting to me is that the balance between domestic and international is looking to be a heck of a lot more healthy for Fantastic Four. Now, it's not good in either regard. We've talked before about how Superman has a huge international problem, and those problems are just going to get worse this coming weekend because even though competition tends to not have a huge impact as far as the domestic box office is concerned, because again, if you want to go see a movie, you're going to go see a movie. It does have a much bigger impact when we deal with international audiences because for them, they, depending on their country, only will get a certain number of American films in a given year, will only be able to therefore put their focal points on those movies to a very limited degree because they're going to have a lot more local fare that they're likely going to be more drawn to or supportive of. And so when you have competition in that instance, okay, at that point, it does actually make a little bit more sense for there to be a bit more differentials between those two, right? Basically, what we have going on right now for this weekend of Superman is that it's going to be losing the bulk of its premium format screens. Disney, of course, being Disney, is never going to allow any other film to have a lot of competition in the premium format space when they've got a brand new film or within the first couple of weeks. But what's interesting to me is even though Superman's internationals have been low, and as of right now, it's not looking like the internationals for Fantastic Four are going to be all that much better. The fact that you're looking at a closer to 50-50 split between domestic and international for Fantastic Four versus the 60+% domestic versus less than 40% international split for Superman, which again is the only reason why Superman is even right now tracking to do as much as it is because of how well it's doing domestically, does, I think, seem to indicate that there's the potential for Fantastic Four to end up winning that battle. Now, again, still way too early, but those differences do matter. The splits between domestic and international do matter quite a bit. And so if it's able to drive out a similar number of people in both markets and is therefore able to drive that forward and have good word of mouth, good holds, right now, good word of mouth seems to be on its side, at least from critics. Critics, of course, are not the end-all be-all, but again, I've mentioned there are critics that I actually like and I agree with much of the time that are praising this movie as being very different than the more recent MCU fare. Is it going to be enough, though? Again, I do believe that bad movie fatigue is real, and a lot of the bad movies tend to come from the MCU and these giant box office, in the past had been giant box office juggernauts. So, yeah, it's going to be very fascinating to watch these numbers, and of course, we'll go through them. We'll see what's being reported as of right now. And as of right now, it's looking like around a $200 million global opening for Fantastic Four, which is definitely not great. It is not looking too strong at this point, but it's also early tracking. This is using the more traditional metrics, which we've seen in the past have usually been pretty wrong. Normally, they are on the low side. And if that is the case, we're looking at either Fantastic Four coming in just underneath Superman's box office or right at Superman's box office globally, with obviously a much stronger domestic for Superman, but a stronger international or just as strong international with that closer 50-50 split. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether it's going to be as divisive as well. Rogue Attraction, I saw that you just posted that comment there. Also, if for any reason I step away from the stream today, again, we only go about an hour here for the morning show for the Good Morning Asgard podcast. We have someone who is working on our air conditioning. We had a refrigerant leak, apparently. And so the amount of work should take long enough to go past this stream, but just in case, if I get distracted or if I turn away or if I put up the be right back screen or whatever, that is what is going on there. So just letting y'all know that straight off the bat. All right, let's go into the chat and then we will jump then into our first stories and dive a little bit deeper on what these numbers are looking like for Fantastic Four. Thanatos Felicitas, hello Odin, he said at 9:53. Hello to you. We got Jay Price hanging out. Hail Odin, hail to you. Thank you for being here. The Morak, hello Odin, happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday to you, the Morak. Great day. Great day. We got Eastland Burkholder saying hello. Hello, Eastland Burkholder. Brandon Dudd hanging out. Yeah, it's not looking great for it, but in comparison to Superman, it's currently not catastrophic. It could be, depending on what those numbers end up being. But we've been saying this for a while now, right? Us in the box office space, that even though the domestic likely will not be very competitive between these two movies, right? Between Superman and between Fantastic Four. I think Fantastic Four is going to run away with that domestic, right? It's going to have that huge victory domestically. If it's opening, if Fantastic Four is opening very similar to Superman with good word of mouth, and is able to keep pace with that domestic to a certain level, to a certain extent, like having a very strong week 2 hold. MCU films historically don't have good week 2 holds, right? So if it's able to do something like Superman did, drop in that 50 to 60% range in week 2, but has an international that is much better, much healthier than what Superman's is, you could see both films end up either at the same number, or really it'll show us really how important those international numbers are, because if internationally it's much more friendly to Fantastic Four, that would mean Fantastic Four could actually have a bigger global box office than Superman, right? There is that potential. So we'll see. J.S. Pena saying, good morning. Good morning to you. J.S. Pena tagging to say, also, I saw Superman last night. Heavy sigh. Some good moments here and there, but overall, James Gunn, what the heck have you done? Again, a lot of people feel that way. And unfortunately, most people hearing your comments would call you a hater, call you a grifter, right? All the terms and names that are thrown around these days just because someone is critical of a movie that is worthy of criticism, mind you. It just kind of reminds me, again, it's like deja vu all over again. It's like when the first DC EU movies were coming out, when Man of Steel came out, when BVS came out, and anyone critical of that, right, got annihilated by all of the cultists, right, all of the Snyder Bro cultists. Well, the gun nuts are out in full force, it seems. It's kind of amazing. And again, if you like the movie, you're not the gun nut, right? But if you're going out of your way to defend the film at every second of every day, it's like, okay, at that point, come on, guys. GMuggets86, what's going on? Fantastic Four should probably end around 550. Again, opening weekend, $200 million, an average run, right? Most films, on average, tend to make 3 times their global debut, right? So that's on average. So that would put, obviously, Superman, right, in that $600 to $700 million category. And it's looking based on these current numbers, Fantastic Four would be in a very similar category as well, right? If it's opening to 200-ish million, guess what? That means around $600 million globally. And again, right now, Superman has the edge. But this is, again, going to be a battle of international versus domestic. Because if internationally Fantastic Four is better received and is able to do something that Superman has not been able to do, Superman has not been able to get any grasp of the international market the last 2 weeks, it could end up giving Fantastic Four the edge because there is typically more money internationally. Most films, globally speaking, have a 60-40 split, where 40% of their box office comes from the domestic and 60% comes from the international. Superman is backwards with this, right? 60+% is coming domestically with less than 40% coming internationally in many cases. So that is a very bad sign for that movie as far as overall global box office health. Now, again, that doesn't mean it's going to flop. It doesn't mean that it's a catastrophe, but it does show why that international number is so important. And even though the MCU has struggled this year in both domestic and international markets, they've also had 2 really bad movies. You know, Thunderbolts supposedly had good word of mouth, and yet that good word of mouth did nothing for it. I think the MCU brand has obviously taken quite a hit over the years. But with the Fantastic Four, because it's such a different movie, again, I haven't seen it yet, but it's very clearly, and every review has mentioned this, it's not as much of a superhero comic book movie as it is a sci-fi movie. That could be the difference. That could be the thing that maybe makes enough normies say, ooh, this is different. This seems unique. I might actually want to go see this, especially if the reviews are good. And as of right now, the reviews are looking pretty good. Rogue Attraction is indeed here. Michael Burgett tagging to say, hey, Odin, AMC let me know that Shin Godzilla tickets went on sale this morning. Already got my ticket Friday for opening. Opening for Friday. Nice. Very cool. Justin C. tagging to say, good morning, sir. Has there been any film released this year that has warranted seeing more than once? Feels like no this year. Yeah, I mean, that's going to depend on the person. I think some might argue F1. I thought F1 was fun. It's one that I do plan on seeing again. It's not one that I feel like I have the need to go out and see again. But that's the one that comes to mind. I mean, I'm sure there might be some other films that y'all can think of, but those are the ones. Yeah, so first off, pre-sales don't matter all that much, right? I just don't really put a lot of stock in pre-sales because pre-sales just tell you how many people have already bought their tickets. It doesn't tell you how many are showing up on the day because Superman could have had smaller pre-sales but had a lot more people show up on the day. And that's what we've seen happen before, right? I mention this all the time. When Solo: A Star Wars Story was about to come out, the huge narrative that was being spun was, oh man, the pre-sales are so good. And then the opening weekend came about and it ended up being not as impressive because there was no walk-up traffic. There was no one who was actually going out of their way to go see the movie. And so that, I think, is where we need to, probably keep our minds here, right? Is that it is not about the pre-sales, it is about the walk-up traffic. So, anyway. Cool. All right, let's go ahead and dive into our first bit of news/discussion. Really, it's going to be the main discussion, the main topic of today. Again, if I've seen scatterbrained, it's because we do have someone working on our air conditioning, and it should be taking past this stream, but I honestly don't know if there's going to be any issues found or anything, and so I let the guy know to knock on my office door if they need anything, and so anyway. That's why I'm a little scatterbrained today. But we're going to talk about some numbers here and some math. And as always, there's a reason you come here to the channel, and it's to see this.
Time to see a real mathematician at work.
That's right. You come here to see the math. All right, let's go ahead and dive into it. So as you can see right now, the daily numbers for Superman, let's start off there, have still been pretty good. Right, this is the second Monday now, dropping 63% from the previous day, from Sunday, dropping 63%. What's interesting to me is actually more so a note about Jurassic World Rebirth that had almost the same exact level of drop, and it just honestly is amazing to me that Rebirth is doing as well as it is. I did not think Rebirth domestically, especially, would be doing as well as it is, and yet the fact remains that even though right now Superman is tracking very, very strongly, there is a world where Jurassic World Rebirth is competitive with it as far as its long-term box office is concerned. It's still making quite a bit of money, right? This past weekend alone, let's put up the weekend chart. The fact that Rebirth in its third weekend still made another $23 million, that's just really impressive. I just, there's no other way of saying it. But anyway, Superman is also very impressive, right? A week 2 drop-off of only 53% is very good. Most superhero movies, most comic book movies don't see drops at that level. Most of them drop in the 60s plus, right? I think on average 65+% is what most of those films tend to see. Superman, however, is holding very strongly. But the big question is going to be how is it going to hold? How well or not is it going to do once it has a little competition? Now, I've mentioned this several times before. Competition does not typically impact box office. If that was the case, Jurassic World Rebirth would not be making as much money, but clearly it still is. Clearly a lot of people are still going to see it. And so what that tells us is that competition, at least domestically, is not always a, final nail in the coffin type situation for a movie, right? For a movie's release either, right? Just because there are multiple films out at the box office at the same time does not mean that there is necessarily going to be any issues or any problems. And so that is something to keep in mind. Now, going over to Fantastic Four, though, the question and the debate, I think, is going to be over international audience. Because the big story, the big narrative for Superman so far has been how bad the film has done internationally. Now, some people might say, oh, how is $100+ million globally a bad thing? It's because these are people that probably don't follow box office and don't recognize that there's a certain standard set when you have an opening weekend of a certain value. There's a certain value to what your splits domestic international are. There's certain historical values as well that we follow, certain historical trends that we follow too. And the fact is that no matter how you slice it, the Superman tracking internationally is abysmal for the kind of movie that it is. When you have that kind of a domestic opening, when you have this kind of a hold domestically, and you are seeing international numbers to such a small degree, and this is all right before another major international film is about to be released, it does, I think, hopefully, to those that are being honest about it, give trepidation to anyone who might think, oh, this box office for Superman has been fantastic. Domestically, absolutely, you are correct. There are no bones about it. Anyone who's going to try to spin the domestic numbers as bad or as not as good in any way, I don't think are being honest. Because domestic numbers are stellar right now for Superman, right? For a comic book movie especially, to have holds like that is a very good thing. It's going to be one of the biggest grossing domestic releases of 2025, in fact. But when your separation from domestic to international is as skewed as it is, and again, in the case of Superman, it is very heavily skewed towards the domestic versus international, it does then paint the way for the future box office to reflect that as well. So if you're looking domestically and you're saying, okay, it's looking like it's going to make X amount of money domestically by the end of its run, we can then look at that same differential of, okay, about a 60-40 split, 60% for this movie domestically versus about 40% internationally. And then we can then calculate, okay, it's going to have a ceiling then of around $600-ish million. And it's not because the film is doing so poorly overall, globally speaking. It's that when you have that much of a separation, you can only make so much money domestically, and you can only make so much money internationally with those kinds of separations, with those kinds of differences. So when you have now Fantastic Four stepping into the fray, this is where it's going to get a bit more complicated for the future prospects of Superman internationally. Domestically, it's not going to really hurt it much. I would not be surprised if it has a drop in the 40% to maybe even low 50% range this coming weekend once Fantastic Four comes out. Because Fantastic Four is going to eat up a lot of these tickets. It's going to take away a lot of those premium format screens. That's why we are still going to see a drop-off. But you're still going to see, I think, a lot of people, maybe even gun nuts, maybe even people who hate the MCU, who want to see something else do better in comparison, go out to see Superman on purpose, right? Or to spend the highest price they can to try to support it, to try to help it in some way. You could absolutely see something like that happen. But how big is that domestic going to be for Fantastic Four? And more importantly, what is the international box office going to look like? So Box Office Theory does not yet have their weekend projections as of this live stream. So the last update we had was from a few days ago, right? From the 17th. So these numbers probably will, if I had to guess, probably adapt down because we know he had massive numbers projected for Superman and it didn't match those. And it's not because Superman underperformed, it's because his metric that he uses, which is oftentimes very accurate, relies so heavily on pre-sales and on social media interactions and things like that it oftentimes can get tricked, right? Or it very rarely can get tricked, because that's what we've really seen. And the common theme between both Fantastic Four and Superman is this: both of them had this weird, oh, look at these pre-sales, right? Everyone was like, oh my gosh, it shut down Fandango, and oh my goodness, people are going crazy, like the amount of shows that are selling out for this movie, for this release. But when you actually look at the data, you're like, but wait a minute, like, just because this one website happens to shut down does not mean much of anything. If anything, it just shows you that no one's going to the movies anymore because they can't even take a general movie release as far as ticket sales are concerned, is what that says to me. But when you take that into account, that's why you have Box Office Theory having, right now, Fantastic Four set to have a 125 to 145 domestic opening. That's just not going to happen, right? That's just not likely going to happen, I should say, more accurately. What's more likely to happen is something that we have, and again, I just realized I didn't have it pulled up. I had it pulled up on my other computer. There it is. This is the article I was looking for. So Deadline, good old Tony and Nance over at Deadline, they have some early indications of what the box office is going to be for Fantastic Four. And as you can see here, it says the first step's expected to be big, with $190 to $210 million globally. Now, again, a couple of things. First, I hate their headlines because they're almost always disingenuous and they're almost always filled with puns that just make me cringe. So first off, cringe headline because, oh my gosh, really? But more so to the point, it's not really accurate. If you're going to say that this is a huge opening or a big opening and insinuate that, you need to remember a couple of things. Do you remember a little film called Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness? That movie opened, people forget, to $450 million at the global box office. So with how bad that movie was, and how terrible the drops after that were because of how bad the film was, the film with a 450 opening should have easily made $1 billion, and it didn't even do that. It edited over $900 million, but that was actually a really bad box office performance based off of that alone, and not to mention how much of that budget and how much they spent on that movie in reality, right? Shout out to Forbes and Caroline Reed for exposing how much money they spent on that, because that film was not a box office hit, even though on paper it really should have been. But that's kind of a standard to me where it's like, okay, if this is not hitting 450, and that's what the MCU, that's what a Doctor Strange movie was able to hit globally, 210, even less than 200 million, that's not good. So firstly, we look at that. How does this compare to other MCU films? This is one of the lowest. This is going to be historically one of the lowest, one of the worst MCU openings in its history. Because again, you have to adjust for inflation. You have to take things and compare them apples to apples as best as we can, whether it be ticket sales, whether it just be adjusting for inflation. This is on the low end of that. This is not a good opening. Now, again, we're not talking about the Marvels levels. This is not a catastrophe, but it is still a sign of how weak the MCU is in the current day, okay? So that's the first thing. Let's go into the numbers here and say, okay, what exactly is this looking like? It says, more smelling salts at the box office this weekend, which will continue to wake up audiences from superhero fatigue. Oh boy. That just has Tony's box office talk conversation, his lingo all over it, and it drives me insane. Again, superhero fatigue really isn't a thing. Bad movie fatigue is a thing, and most of the bad films have been a lot of really bad superhero movies. So that's what people are tired of, right? And that's why people are more cautious with buying and pre-buying tickets to MCU movies, because most of them have been bad, right? We've had 2 films this year, and they were both bad. Thunderbolts was not good, despite the fact that people tried to make it into a thing. They tried to make it into a thing, and then guess what? Box office reflected exactly how there was no real spark behind that movie. Brave New World was even worse, and somehow made more money, right? That's just the state of things. But even that, right? Both films were financial failures for that very reason. So let's just not, throw any bones here about what's going on here. But anyway, it's expected to open to $190 to $210 million around the world. This comes in the wake of DC's studios' success. Again, hard to say that at this point because it has not made its money back. With James Gunn's Superman, which is soaring beyond $409 million globally. Again, it needs to make $650 just to break even. It'll probably do it. I've said this in my box office breakdown last week that it's likely going to make profit, but it is not the huge success that people are trying to spin it to be. Also, First Step's global start here is pegged at being around Superman's $220 million. Now, again, that is that reminder that in a most likely scenario, if these numbers hold, or if it does less, yeah, Superman will have the advantage, right? Superman opened to $220-ish million globally in its opening weekend. 190 to 210 is not a very good by comparison. So not only is individually Fantastic Four not expected to be one of the highest of the MCU, and in fact, said to be one of the lowest openings in the history of the MCU, it is also expected to come in underneath Superman. Right, that's going to be a film that we're going to see a lot of comparisons to. But how do those numbers break down? This, to me, is something I don't think a lot of people are going to focus on, and they probably should. Here it goes. The international box office for Fantastic Four is 90 to 100 million, with room for upside, particularly if families lean in given the film's themes. The domestic projection is anywhere between 100 and 110 million dollars. So here is the difference, okay? When you saw the opening weekend for Superman, it opened to 125 million domestically and only 95 million internationally. Now, some people are going to stop there and say, but wait a minute, 95 million? What's the average of 90 to 100 million? That's 95. So it's going to have the same international. So why is that not bad for this one? As I said, I started off the whole conversation with this is a bad global number for Fantastic Four. This is not the kind of number that Marvel likes to see or really usually sees from the box office. Again, $450 million opening weekend globally for Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness. That's the number out there that needs to be reminded, that people need to be reminded of all the time, as far as how low the MCU has gotten at this point. But it also needs to be mentioned that even though the international is looking to be about the same as where Superman's was, you are still seeing a closer to 50-50 split between domestic and international here. That's very close numbers, 90 to 100 million international, 100 to 110. That may not seem like it matters a whole lot, but down the road, down the stretch, it actually matters quite a bit. So that's the number I'm going to be paying attention to this weekend. Because if it does better than expected domestically, better than expected internationally, and those internationals come in higher than the domestic, but both of them are on the upside, that, to me, says there's a lot more health for that kind of box office down the stretch than for the situation going on right now with Superman. Because after 2 weeks now, as it mentioned, $409 million globally, remember, the vast majority of that money coming for Superman is domestic, right? $243 million is the current domestic take for Superman, only $173 currently right now for the international. That is the separation I'll be paying attention to. So does Fantastic Four, will that film be able to have a healthier split, domestic, international, and also will it be able to drive more international audiences out opening weekend and down the stretch? This is what's going to be fascinating because the best chance the best chance Superman had to win over international audiences was its first 2 weeks. Because there was no, quote, competition, there was nothing to cause anything, to cause any concerns or issues. But now it's not going to have that advantage anymore. And because the positive word of mouth currently for Fantastic Four is as strong as it seems to be, as I said, right, people I trust are enjoying this film, are saying very positive things about it. I think it does indicate that we'll probably see a higher than expected global opening, probably well north of $200 million, which again is still bad as an MCU film, for the record, for anyone tries to spin, oh, you're just spinning a narrative here. Like, no, I'm just saying that domestic international split is a very important one because look, just go ahead and compare different numbers here, right? So the Batman, right? These are adjusted for inflation. The Batman ended its run at $396 million domestic, $432 million international. Right now, Superman is tracking behind the Batman domestically. So Superman is not likely to hit 396 domestically. I think 350 sounds about right to me. We'll have to wait and see. It's still pretty early. Internationally, though, there is no chance for Superman to get anywhere close to that number. I think they would be lucky to hit $300 million internationally. And if it only does $300 million and this does $350, that's only $650 million. And again, on paper, that sounds pretty good. But when your budget is, they say 225, I call BS on that. I just don't see how that's realistic based off of the public filing, right? If you are putting out a number on a form for a tax credit, I'm sorry, In what world do we say, oh yeah, we can just put any number we want on there? We can overestimate by $100 million, and that's fine. Again, I don't know the rules of the tax law, but it doesn't sound quite right to me. It doesn't sound quite right to common sense, right? It sounds like, hey, if you're off by a few million here and there, 10 to 20 million, okay, that makes sense. You were just estimating. But this would mean they would have to have been off by about $100 million because, yes, that's before your tax credits, that $360 million number that was out there. But there's no way that they got over $100 million in tax credits. Like that's insane. That's unheard of. So anyway, getting back to it, that international number that's why that international number is so important. And the excuse that was given before about, oh, well, Superman doesn't play well internationally. Okay, that explains Man of Steel's $524 million internationally. I'll wait. Oh, well, it's just because, of all the nonsense media stuff about James Gunn. It's like, James Gunn's not been liked for a long time. Guess what? Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, that did $500 million there. Even the Batman did $432 million. And as I said, if you look at these numbers here, Second Monday, 6.9. Yeah, that beats Man of Steel. But Man of Steel was also at 298 at the same point of release. Again, adjusted for inflation. It beats Guardians. Again, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 did better than expected, but a lot of the reason why it did as well as it did was those international numbers, which Superman does not have. But look at this number here for the Batman comparison. 263 versus 243. And then that second weekend especially, 19-30-21 versus 16-23-18. Superman is not holding as well as the Batman did, as far as the raw numbers are concerned. That's a problem. Because, again, it's Superman domestic seems to be having a ceiling. It's only going to be able to make so much money. And because those internationals are not running away with it, and there's no indication that they will, it puts it in a very precarious situation. Okay, the other thing that I keep hearing, the other excuse that I'm hearing from a lot of the gun nuts is about how, oh, well, this is still really good. I mean, I think it was John Campea who apparently, someone mentioned this last a couple nights ago on the stream, that apparently John Campea is talking about Batman as a comparison, saying, oh, well, Batman Begins didn't make a whole lot of money, and it set the stage for The Dark Knight, right? Well, even that movie, when you adjust, when you actually are a bit fairer to it, still made $629 million globally. And Superman is on pace to maybe hit that number. It has a chance to hit that number. But the other thing that people don't remember is that was back in 2005, for one. The international audience was not nearly as a part of the box office discussion as it is today, is a second point there that they just want to gloss over. And third, Christopher Nolan's name was known by many. But as far as normies are concerned, most normies had no idea who Christopher Nolan was. Batman was the introduction of many people to who Christopher Nolan was. And that is the reason why his first movie, Batman Begins, starts off low. But because everyone's like, oh, this guy's awesome. Dark Knight comes out, boom. What does that do? That makes over $1 billion at the box office. That's even before adjusting for inflation. Over $500 million domestically. Internationally, even back then when internationals was not a huge part of it. That's why your domestic international split is the way that it is. But even that one was closer to a 50-50 split back then. Even the terrible Dark Knight Rises made more than this one. Because Nolan was not a known entity, and his introduction made people very interested, and it pushed people forward. James Gunn's already known. James Gunn is already a known entity. People know his shtick. People know who he is. This is not introducing more people. This is not introducing too many new people to James Gunn. No one's coming to this movie saying, oh, wow, James Gunn. Oh, my goodness, this guy can make movies. No, they would have done that back, 2014, when Guardians of the Galaxy came out. And ever since then, he's been chasing that. And ever since then, people said, man, I had fun, but not as good as Guardians. Oh, man, that was fun, but not as good. Some people will, again, go to his defense for various reasons. But none of the excuses are really working right now. The fact is that Superman individually, as its own release, is doing fine. It's doing okay. It's doing great international. Sorry, it's doing fantastic domestically, doing very badly internationally. All right, again, guess what? That averages out to being it's doing fine. Fantastic Four is not set to do much better according to the numbers as they stand, but this one has a lot more room to grow than Superman does. Superman's been out for 2 weeks. Minds have been made up on that movie already. And now that competition's coming in, we'll see. Does this opening weekend match that of Superman? Does it do better or worse? Right now, it's tracking to do worse. But where does that international audience come in? And does this track better with the international audiences? As of right now, at least individual film release, Fantastic Four is a 60-40 domestic split. This is looking to be closer to a 50-50 split. That tells me this one has a lot of a brighter future internationally than Superman does. And again, that's just my own thought on that. Spent a lot of time, but I thought it was important to kind of get all of those things out there to get a understanding of those things. All right. Let's head back into the chat. Hoza Taco, Hail Chat, and Odin. What's going on? King Kane Rumsking hanging out over the Green Machine. Fantastic Four getting solid reviews initially. Yeah, it is. Now, let's be honest about those reviews. It's like, I've heard this before. I feel like there were a lot of positive reviews that came out for Captain America Brave New World initially. Thunderbolts, a lot of people gave that positive praise initially. But then reality always hits back in. Right? Reality always comes crashing back in every time. There's no way around it. All right. Let's see. Yeah, we just talked about that. Again, if you have any comments or questions that you want read aloud or highlighted, just put @Odin at the very beginning of your comment. @Odin lets me know you're trying to get my attention. And of course, if you are a member on the channel, you don't have to do that. And if you would like to get your comment read faster, you can always super chat or donate via Streamlabs, which means none of that money goes to YouTube. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. Ant-Man 3 opened at 225. Yeah, not looking good. So again, that's why I start off by saying, all right, as an MCU movie, Fantastic Four is not looking like it's having a good release. In comparison to Superman, it's actually a mixed. Because if it hits exactly where Deadline says it's going to hit, oh boy, trouble is on the rise there. That week 2 number is going to be critical. Because if it has your typical MCU drop-off, which most of the MCU films do have, then it's not going to be good. It's going to be really bad news going forward, and our projections will indicate that. But if it's able to do better internationally, and if it's able to do fine domestically, it could end up legging out against Superman. And again, still way too early to tell, but we'll have to wait and see. Let's see. The More Act, I had to say, Valiant Renegade said the form is an application to allow Warner Brothers to be able to get in line for tax credits. He had a video on it that I saw yesterday. So it's an application to allow Warner Brothers to be able to get in line for tax credits. But still, it is a form where they are saying how much money they're spending. Like that's, again, he says, okay, so Scummy Wummy says it's probably okay to overestimate like that. Again, Valiant Renegade would probably know more than I would on that one because he knows a bit more about the tax law there. I just don't see how you can get away with that. Again, maybe it's the kind of form that it is, but to me, if you're saying 360 and in reality it's closer to 300 and then you're saying you're getting, what, 60 million plus in tax credits, that's where no matter where you're going with it, they're either... Because, again, if you're off by that much money, that's the one that gets me. It's like, wait a minute. If they're saying 360 on the tax form, but now they're saying 225, and that 225 would have to include the tax credits they've already gotten, that's where it doesn't make sense to me. Mark Lisseth, what's going on? Welcome. Kane Corso, what's going on there? There's no need to spam. Kane Corso, this is your one warning. Dude, you don't have to say the same thing over and over again. Did you... Yeah, on principle, I'm going to skip it. On principle, I'm going to skip it because if there's one thing that annoys me, it's spam. Then I was deleted as saying, the marketing for Superman made me not want to see it. I don't blame you, dude. I do not blame you. Caveat Ties, what's going on? King and Rumsky Taddy say, I think all the DEI stuff about Fantastic Four was wrong and Galactus looks badass. Yeah, again, that's what everyone has been saying, is that a lot of the speculation about the movie is not correct and that the film is actually a good sci-fi film. Now, I know that Gary saw it. I have not seen his video. I assume he talked about it on Real BBC, or is going to talk. Again, I don't follow everybody because I just don't have that mental capacity to do so. But I would love to hear what Gary had to say about it. I don't know if he's just saving it for his review. But anyway. Let's see. Eric Herrera, what's going on? 1038 saying, do you think that Fantastic Four will do better than Rebirth for international numbers? No, I don't. And that's just, again, that is something that none of these movies we're going to have a chance at, right? Is the international audiences, for some reason, love dinosaurs. They are obsessed with dinosaurs. That's the reason why every Jurassic World movie has made $1 billion. Think about that for a second, right? There's been 3 Jurassic World films. Each of them have made over $1 billion. The last one barely did it. It was willed to that extent by, was it Universal? And it did it at the very end of its box office run. This movie is not tracking to do that. It's tracking enough behind the last movie to where mathematically $1 billion doesn't seem likely. But internationally, there's going to be no competition between it and anything else that comes out over the summer. So yeah, I think if you're talking about what's going to win the battle, I think Superman actually has a pretty good chance of winning the domestic battle between it, Jurassic World, and Fantastic Four. I think it's going to be a no question victory for Jurassic World's international between those 3 movies. The big question is going to be, how much better does Fantastic Four's international do in comparison to its domestic? Because that's why it's not yet a case closed situation with which is going to win the battle at the box office between Fantastic Four and Superman. Because right now Superman has a huge advantage domestically. It's doing fantastic in the domestic market, but it's doing so poorly international that it gives a lot of space for Fantastic Four to make some of that up. But Jurassic World also has a good case to be made in the domestic market because it's also holding well domestically. I don't quite understand it, but all right. Justin C. Chris Gore enjoyed Fantastic Four. Gary, not so much. To nobody's surprise. Should be a fun FNT discussion. Okay, so he didn't like it. Again, not really much of a surprise, but I wonder if it's one of those situations where he hated it or he didn't hate it as much as he thought he would. Again, I haven't seen his thoughts. Giggles and Bits at 1040. It doesn't make sense. They would have to have known the budget. That stuff is finalized already. Yeah. At the time in which that document would have been filed, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but by the time that it was filed, they would have already started the filmmaking process. So that's money they would have either already spent or that they already would have allocated. Now, it's possible for films to come in under budget. I don't know of situations where films come in that much under budget. Because again, 225 is the number that they are putting out there now. That's the number that they are floating to the trades. That's very, very different than 360. And even if they were able to cut costs down, I think 50 million would make sense. That would be 310. And then in that case, you're still like, that's almost $100 million worth of tax credits. That doesn't make sense. So that's why either 225 is not accurate. And that's why in my chart, I have 255, because honestly, it's at least 255 as far as actual budget is concerned. Like that, nothing else makes sense. Arnold, hey, text say, what's up, brother? Finally made it to your live stream in the morning. Yeah, word of mouth is post-credit scene is jaw-dropping for Fantastic Four. Interesting. Rogue Attraction says, I think Gary is waiting till FNT since he is at Comic-Con. Interesting. Gary can't talk about it until FNT. It was okay, better than Superman. Interesting. I feel like, I know he's at Comic-Con, but I feel like that's a video that he would have out there soon because the views are just waiting. A billion is a billion. Not each billion is the same. I mean, remember, there were the terrible live action Alice in Wonderland movies with Johnny Depp. The first one, guess what? The first one made $1 billion. Second one, not so much. Not every billion is created equally. Oh, let's see. Caveat ties tagged to say dinosaurs translate in every language. It's a very good point. Amber's Chamberpot, what's going on? Welcome. Let's see. Kigan Rumsky says, it looks like there is an effort to DI attack movies before they come out to make them look more woke than they actually are. Do you think this is coordinated? I don't think so. I suspect that a lot of that's because of Superman. I think that it comes more so from the people that are gun nut defenders of the movie than from actual regular. Because again, I'm in that middle ground. I think the people who were making the videos saying that the movie was woke, I don't think that they're really coming from a genuine place. I think that they are overthinking it because the movie is already worthy of criticism far beyond anything else, right? If you just go to the actual objective qualities of the movie, there's plenty to criticize there. That's why I've been consistent to say the biggest reason why the film is not as good as people say it is because it is factually speaking a tonal mess. You do not know whether to take something seriously or to laugh because everything that is set up as serious has some kind of punchline at the end of it. And so it means you can't take anything seriously. And at that point, it's like, if I can't take anything seriously in this movie, what's the point of watching it? That's a part of the tonal mess that the movie has. So you don't even have to go into the route of talking politics or something being woke or not. And again, nothing in the film really indicates that. I do think that there's definitely a political message to be said. But that's most movies in general, right? I think that you could say, oh, was he influenced by certain people? Was he influenced by certain events happening? Oh, yeah, for sure. But it doesn't really go out of its way to make any political messaging, right? So I think anyone who's saying that, or people who have those headlines where it's like new Superman is woke, it's like, not really. How about the new Superman is not great? The new Superman has issues. It has issues. That's where I would go with that instead. So I don't think it's coordinated at all. I think it's just people who are most likely just already in and of themselves clickbaity. So, yeah. Again, I have not seen Fantastic Four, so I don't know whether or not the rumors about that one are true. Even if someone says who's seen the film that it's not true, that doesn't always necessarily mean that it's not there, because I've heard early reviews for movies that ended up having a lot of messaging in there that just was kind of glossed over, because some people are ignorant of that stuff. DeBeast808, what's going on, saying, aloha, my brother. So Soups wins domestic, Jurassic World wins overall, and Fantastic Four is just left out in the cold box office-wise? It depends. So it's not going to win anything, right? It's not going to win a domestic battle. It's not going to win an international battle, but that does not necessarily mean that it's going to be last. As I said, total global box office, right now it has a lot of room to grow, because as of right now, again, take it with a grain of salt, the early reviews are very positive, right? Some even glowing, and I'm not talking about your mainstream critics. I'm talking about, Jeremy Jahns. He gave this film a buy on Blu-ray, buy on 4K rating. I can't remember the last time he did that for an MCU movie. So that to me speaks volumes. Now, again, his opinion is not the end-all be-all, okay? But it does go a long way. It goes a long way for me, right? Jose Taco, what's going on, Jose Taco? Thank you for the $5 donation via Streamlabs. YouTube ain't getting none of that. He says, thanks for answering my questions on YouTube. I enjoy your shows. Well, Jose Taco, I appreciate you, man. Jose Taco. You're awesome, dude. There he is right there tagging. Remember when $100 million total sales was a big deal in the 90s? I know, seriously. Just shows you how bad inflation is, right? So Heal99, do you think that the movie industry would do better if all movies took at least 3 to 6 months to come on VOD streaming like back in the day? What if Disney said Fantastic Four came out on VOD Christmas Day? I mean, I think that overnight it wouldn't do much, because if people don't want to go to the theater, they're going to find other ways. I mean, piracy still exists. But I think that in general, that would be a good thing as far as the general long-term health of theaters, and also even for the studios too, because and they would have to do it together though. That's the other thing, right? If Disney just came out and said, hey, we're changing our strategy, we're just going to have movies with a long theatrical window like back in the day. If they were to do that, and they were the only ones to do that, what they would be doing is leaving a lot of money on the table. And the reason why is because there are a lot of people that, because of COVID, have now been trained to wait until VOD. And they're willing to say, hey, I'll wait for VOD. I'll pay my $20, and I believe you get a much larger return on investment too in VOD. Basically, you get more money back through a VOD purchase than you would at a movie ticket, right? Remember, the deal between studios and theaters is still relatively the same. Like, there's some differences, there's some changes, but in general, it's the same, where studios get a large portion of the box office receipts in your opening weekend, second weekend numbers. But then as the film is longer out in your third, fourth, fifth week, etc., the majority then goes to the theater instead, because they are actually taking on the risk there in that situation, right? Because the longer a film is out there, if it's not a popular movie, no one's going to see it. They're showing it to an empty screen. Therefore, they're eating up those costs. And so they're going to have to get compensated by that. And how do they do that? By getting the majority of the ticket price at that point. So after the first couple weeks, studios really don't have as big of an incentive to keep their films out there too long, because they're getting a lot less back return on investment. And if they were to instead go to VOD, the deals that they have with iTunes, Google Play, all the different locations you can buy movies these days, I believe it's a much better return on investment. And it's not just a better return on investment, it's a better long-term far out sale, right? Every single sale is going to be whatever 60-40, 70-30, whatever the split is. And it's usually very, very good towards the studio, which obviously the platform is still going to get some money too, but it is very much skewed towards the studio in every case. And again, it's their movie, so it makes sense that they would make the majority of that. But in general, I would say it would be a good thing, but they would have to all do it together. Because otherwise, they would just be singling themselves out by leaving a lot of money on the table. But basically, yeah, they would have to, and I hate to put it this way, but they would have to, they have to all work together to socially engineer audiences to a pre-COVID mindset. And I don't think that they have the desire to do that, because it's much easier, and financially it's still okay for them. As I said, they're still getting a good return when they put things on VOD. The problem is that by doing the things that they're doing, they're hurting their first opening weekends, and so they're still making less. So it was, again, in the very beginning, it was good for them because, hey, we're not making much theatrically anyway. Now we can make more money on VOD. But long term, it's actually started to hurt them quite a bit. Rogue Attraction, I am getting more normie questions about Fantastic Four, so it may have possible leg. Again, based off of the current tracking, could be. Sick Parvis Magna, what do you think? Will F1 beat both Superman and F4? Because here in Croatia, theaters are packed for F1. Let's see. F1's doing well for the movie that it is, but it's not going to beat Superman, because right now F1's at $464 million. Again, it has a massive international. Like, this is when we talked before about how there are certain, there's certain relationships between your domestic audience and your international audience. Unfortunately, they don't have the breakdown by percentage. But a healthy relationship is usually a 60-40 split. If you are in the opposite direction, or if you are more extreme than that, it's not as healthy. So as of right now, Box Office Mojo has it at 155 domestic, 309 international. So that's almost a 70-30 split. So 30% or so, roughly 30% of its box office is coming from your domestic, whereas around almost 70% is coming from the international. So because the studio gets much less from international, that's an unhealthy relationship. So globally, it's good because, hey, it's adding to its global box office totals, but that unhealthy relationship is still there. Let's see, King and Rumsky saying, good news. The reviewers are also said that Fantastic Four was indeed serious and without Marvel humor to ruin the moments. Yeah, so that could be a huge change, King and Rumsky. Yeah, I remember it was the Film Threat guys that said that. So if that holds to be true, and this is actually a much more serious film, and it's a serious sci-fi film, word of mouth could take that thing to the moon. And again, it's going to take a lot to do that for a Marvel film. So they're not out of the woods yet. Just because your reviews are good from professional critics, that does not mean much of anything. That's why that opening weekend is going to be important, and that second weekend drop-off is going to be even more important. Because again, right now it's tracking to do about as well, maybe a little less than Superman. That's not a good thing. Again, individually as an MCU movie, that's awful. Up against Superman, that's also bad. But it has a lot more high prospects because it just hasn't released yet. That's the only reason why, right? We have data for Superman. We know what its week 2 drop-off was. We know it's not doing well internationally. We don't have that yet for Fantastic Four. So opening weekend will tell us a lot. Week 2 will tell us a lot more. Week 2 is always the key. Wayward Noodle says, hail to you. Fun with collecting. Good morning. Hail, I'm driving and listening. F1 is still my summer movie. Yeah, it was the best film of the summer, I think. Arnold, hey, do you think 2025 will be the year to have less $1 billion Fallout mark movies than any other year since 2020? We're approaching August and only Lilo and Stitch made it to the $1 billion club. I would say probably not. I would have to actually go back in time because, 2020, but 2021 didn't have many either, if memory serves. And really, most years haven't had too many. Was it 2023 that had a lot? Where it was like, oh man, 3 films all, or was that even last year? Maybe it was last year, right? Because you had Inside Out 2, Deadpool, Wolverine. That was just last year, right? My time is just time is an illusion, right? Time is when it's summertime, especially. My mind is just out of here. But no, so we've had multi-billion-dollar years before, right? And since 2020, I don't know if this would be the least, but basically this film, right? So Lilo and Stitch has crossed $1 billion. We pretty much knew that was going to happen. Superman's not going to do it. I don't care what anyone's going to try to sell you. There's no mathematical way for Superman to reach $1 billion at the box office. That's just not going to happen. Okay. Based on the current tracking, Fantastic Four is not going to do that. Jurassic World Rebirth has a chance. I don't think it will, mind you. Okay, it's still tracking far enough behind the last one, which barely made $1 billion. So if you're tracking behind a barely $1 billion movie, I don't see how you cross that line, right? So yeah, I don't think that that's going to happen for that one. You do still have, and again, this won't make $1 billion until probably it crosses over into 2026, but it still will be a 2025 release, and so I'll still count it for 2025. But you have a Avatar film coming out. So Avatar is I'm going to say right now, it's guaranteed to make at least $1 billion. That's not really going out on a limb much, right? But I can say, yep, Avatar, it's going to at least make $1 billion. Now, I think it's going to make a lot less than the last one. I think that there's a law of diminishing returns there. I think people are getting tired of it, but there's still a lot of people that love it. There's still a lot of people that are entertained by it. That's why it's going to make $1 billion, right? But it's making less and less over time, right? So that movie is set to come out and set to, I think, make $1 billion. Zootopia 2, that's a sleeper. I think people are sleeping on that movie. Zootopia 2, I think that has a chance of hitting $1 billion. Again, still too early to tell, but that's one I would say keep an eye out on. And I don't know if there's any other remakes or reboots coming out this year, but those have seemed to have been the ones that tend to do the best, right? The only $1 billion films that we've really had the last couple of years have been reboots, sequels, etc. So that's where I am right now with that one. Fun with Collecting, who's a member, says here, from what I'm hearing, Fantastic Four's story and characters are hit or miss with people, but most people agree that it's a beautiful looking movie, and that matters when you're buying the 4K physical media. That is true. Like, Fantastic Four might do okay theatrically, but because of that fact that it's looking really good, that could increase its physical media sales for sure. But again, we don't have the numbers yet. Geek True 64, what's going on, brother? Geek True 64, love him. Subscribe to his channel. He's great for physical media. He says, F1 is still the best movie I've seen this year. Agreed. Basic story, but a great experience. Absolutely. Fun with Collecting saying he agrees with Geek Truth. Saw it twice, and he's pre-ordering the 4K. Nice. Caveat Ties, didn't Minecraft make $1 billion? No, it did not. It capped out around $950 million. Got close, but no, it capped out. Geek64, who is a member, says, I was worried they weren't going to release F1 physically since it was from Apple. Usually their movies get trapped on streaming, but it's looking like they might actually put it out. So yeah, the reason why Geek Truth is based off of the research I did. Apple, as the producer of the film, sold all of the rights, essentially, all but one of the distribution rights to Warner Brothers. So Warner Brothers is putting out in theaters, is also putting it out on VOD. Apple is exclusively getting the premium VOD. Or is it the premium streaming? I think it's the premium streaming. That's what it is. So basically, no streaming service will have it except Apple TV Plus. That's all that they have, though. That's all that Apple has left as far as the rights. So I think Warner Brothers has the distribution rights for it to be put out on physical media too. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. But yeah, Warner Brothers, I believe, is going to be doing the physical media for that, because the last I checked, the only rights Apple still had as far as distribution was for streaming, for premium streaming, right? For subscription-based streaming. My Regret, again, we're going to wrap things up. So our last comments are coming in. My Regret saying, only one film was $1 billion, Spider-Man No Way Home in 2022. Or 2021 had only one, okay? 2022 had 3, Avatar 2, Top Gun Maverick, Jurassic World Dominion. 2023 had 2, Barbie and Mario movie. 2024 had 3, Deadpool, Wolverine, Inside Out 2, Moana 2. Yeah, so this year is going to be an average year then for the last couple of years, because we have already Lilo and Stitch, and as I said, Avatar is absolutely going to make $1 billion, so that's already 2 right there, okay? And I think that you could see a third one from Zootopia 2. King and Rumsky, I think I might be getting dizzy going forward as people talk about F1 or F4. Seriously. That's why I imagine Fantastic Four will probably get a nickname, just like the last one got the name Fan Four Stick. Sick Parvis Magna. F1 was fantastic. What a great movie. Superman was okay. I had fun watching it. Yeah, a lot of people did. A lot of people had fun watching it. But it's not as much as people think. I think the people that are hardcore fans of this new Superman are overestimating it in their own minds. They think everyone loves this movie. They think everyone is enjoying it. And a lot of people are, but it's not everybody. And those internationals, especially international markets, are not eating it up the way that they are here in the States. Box office shows that. Justin C. Amazing how the Avatar films make bank at the box office and are so quickly forgotten soon after. Oh, I know, seriously, right? It's honestly astounding how they're able to do that. And also, most people I talk to about the Avatar films will say, oh yeah, it wasn't that great. And yet they still do it. Again, we are wrapping things up, so please hold off on any more questions. Geek264, I'm just getting the ones that are still posted. Geek264 saying, that makes sense. I saw Warner Brothers was most likely putting the physical media out. Yeah, again, based off of what I know about the distribution deal, Warner Brothers has that. And then Steven, 1102, hey, brother, great to catch you in the morning. How's your summer going? You're going to review Fantastic Four for FNT? Yes, planning to see and review Fantastic Four on FNT. I'll also post my review up on Critic List as soon as I see it. So if you want to get early thoughts on my early thoughts on the film, Critic List is the place to be. I'm not sponsored by them. I just happen to really like their site. So if you want to know what other people think about a movie as soon as possible, Critic List is the place to go. Rotten Tomatoes, you can't trust. They've changed their system too much. They've tweaked behind the scenes. They've done a lot of dirty things, Rotten Tomatoes has. And so Rotten Tomatoes has lost all credibility as far as I'm concerned. Metacritic is okay. It's fine in a pinch, but it also has that issue where it can very easily get taken over by critics and especially by their audience reviews, right? Critic List is a place where you really don't get review bombing. That's a really nice thing about it. It's kind of hard to do that. People might try, but in general, you're getting a much more normie take about movies. So yeah, I would actually highly recommend Critic List if you are not over there yet. Criticlist.com. Criticlist.com. And actually, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up there because I want to make sure that everyone's able to head over to Geeks and Gamers for the Geeks and Gamers daily stream. But let me see if anyone over on Critic List has been able to review the film yet, because they've only had one showing and it was only for critics. So it's got one review and it was a 60% rad score. So that's what the early review says on Critic List. So again, take that with whatever grain of salt you need. But as of right now, I love the battle between the likes and dislikes. Fantastic Four First Steps is the best superhero movie of the year, and it pleasantly surprised me. The music was fantastic. Sorry I couldn't resist. The sets are all real instead of CGI, and it really showed. Johnny Storm stole the show, and there are stakes again, which felt good. Of course, there are nitpicks where I think it could have been better, but overall, it was a pretty good film. If you're looking for a new superhero movie, this is the one to choose. You can thank me later. That was Weapon X Critics, who gave a review there. He left the other topics unrated. And Banjo Sandwich, of course, had to troll him. But anyway. Hey, The Beast, you remain blessed as well. All right, that's going to be it for me, everybody. Head out to gigsandgamers.com. I'm sure that they'll be covering that same article that I just did as well about the Fantastic Four box office coming up. But yeah, it's a mixed bag right now, right? Right now, it's looking like it's going to come in lower than Superman. That's awful for it as an individual movie, but it's looking like it also might have a much better chance at the international box office with a much healthier 50-50 split between domestic and international. We'll see. We'll see how that pans out. We'll see if it does better than expected. And, of course, we'll cover that right here on OMB Reviews. And so, yeah, be on the lookout for my box office preview video, which will go live sometime on Friday when I get some of the official projections for the weekend. And then we'll do our full box office breakdown this coming Sunday as well. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. You are all amazing and beautiful people. We probably only have one of these left because summer is ending. Next week is the last week of July. So I might have meetings next week. I don't know yet. I'll have to look back at my calendar because we always start like first thing in August. So I'll keep y'all posted on that. So again, this might be the last one, but I think there's a good chance for us to still have a stream next weekend. I will let everyone know on the channel page on YouTube, also on X/Twitter, Discord server as well. Check out the top link in the video description below if you want to get access to any of those locations that I've just mentioned. And yeah, you guys have an amazing rest of your Wednesday, an amazing week. Hey, good for theaters, at least, that people are going to the theaters once again. Not still to the same levels, but hey, something is better than nothing, I suppose. You guys are amazing. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribestar people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.